Ethan Marlowe never expected the past to come calling. One late night, a message from his childhood friend Daniel, missing for over 15 years, appeared on his phone. What began as a reunion quickly twisted into something unnatural, pulling Ethan back to the woods of his youth, where the truth had been buried all along. But the Daniel he found was not the boy he remembered, and some friendships are far harder to escape than death itself. The message came late at night, when the world outside my window was silent and still. My phone vibrated on the nightstand, and half asleep, I reached for it, expecting some meaningless notification. But when I saw the name on the screen, my breath caught in my throat. It was Daniel, a name I hadn't heard in more than 15 years, my childhood friend, my lost friend, the friend who had vanished without explanation one summer night, leaving behind nothing but questions that were never answered. I sat up in bed, staring at the message. The words were simple. I need to see you. It's important. There was nothing else, no greeting, no explanation. Just that strange request. My heart began to race, pounding so loudly I thought it might wake the entire neighborhood. Memories I had buried long ago crawled back to the surface. I saw Daniel's face as a boy, laughing as we raced down dirt paths through the woods. I remembered us sneaking into the old barn, daring each other to climb its rotting beams, swearing we'd never be scared of anything. But beneath those happy flashes, there were darker shadows. I remembered the night he disappeared, the frantic search parties combing through every inch of the forest, the way his parents packed up and moved away after hope crumbled into despair. Daniel was gone, and everyone assumed the worst. So why was his name glowing on my phone screen now? The profile picture showed nothing, just a gray circle, blank and lifeless. No posts, no details, nothing but silence on the account until now. I should have ignored it, told myself it was a cruel trick, maybe someone pretending. But the weight of the past pulled me in. Against all reason, I answered. The following evening, I agreed to meet him at a cafe near the edge of our old hometown. I drove there in silence, my thoughts an endless spiral of doubt and dread. The streets looked the same as they had when I was young, though emptier, lonelier, like time had forgotten them. By the time I pulled up to the cafe, the sun had already sunk, and the windows glowed weakly with yellow light. Inside, the place was nearly deserted. A few tables sat empty, a faint hum of an old refrigerator filling the silence. But in the back corner, I saw a figure. My heart lurched violently in my chest. He was sitting alone, his head bowed slightly. His body was thinner, his shoulders sharper than I remembered. But it was Daniel. It had to be. I forced myself to walk closer, my footsteps echoing too loudly on the floor. As I neared, the figure lifted his head. His face came into the dim light, and the air seemed to thin around me. It was him, yet not him. His skin was pale, stretched tight, and his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He just stared. I sat across from him, my hands trembling beneath the table. I waited for him to speak, to say anything, to explain where he had been all these years. But his lips never parted. He just kept watching me, his head tilting slightly to one side, like he was examining something fragile. A minute passed. Or maybe an hour. I couldn't tell. Then, from the pocket of my jacket, I felt the buzz of my phone. I hesitated before pulling it out, my fingers numb. On the screen was another message from Daniel's account. "I'm glad you came." I froze. My heart began to hammer. Slowly, I lifted my eyes back to him. His hands rested motionless on the table, his lips still sealed shut. He hadn't typed anything. He hadn't touched a phone. And yet the message glowed in front of me, undeniable. The air around me felt colder, heavier. I wanted to speak, to break the silence, but my voice refused to come. The figure across from me didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't breathe in a way that looked natural. His gaze bore into me, unrelenting, until my skin prickled with goosebumps. The cafe was empty except for us, yet I felt like something unseen crowded the room, pressing against my back, listening in the silence. My phone buzzed again, but this time I didn't look at it. I was too afraid of what I'd find. When I finally did gather the courage to glance at the screen, the blood drained from my face. Another message. Just 2 words, glowing against the dark glass. Don't leave. And when I looked back up, Daniel's head tilted a little further, his eyes wider, unblinking, as if he already knew I was planning to run. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to close my eyes without seeing his face again. The pale, unmoving figure across the cafe table, the stillness that clung to him like a second skin, and the way the words had appeared on my phone without him ever lifting a finger, it all replayed over and over in my head. Every time I blinked, I saw his eyes fixed on me, glassy and unblinking, as though they weren't really eyes at all but empty windows staring out from something hollow. Sleep never came. I rolled from side to side, listening to the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, the low hum of the street lamp outside my window. Hours passed like years. My phone lay on the nightstand, silent but alive, as though it were waiting for me to pick it up again. I told myself I wouldn't, that I'd ignore him, block the number, delete the messages. But even the thought of doing that left me uneasy, as if cutting him off would be some kind of mistake. At exactly 3:15 a.m., the screen lit up without warning. My heart lurched, and I sat up instantly. Another message appeared. Walk with me tomorrow night. Same woods. The woods. The words struck me like a blow. We had spent entire summers exploring those trees, weaving through paths that seemed endless, inventing stories of monsters and ghosts. But those same woods were where Daniel had vanished, the last place he was ever seen. Search parties had scoured every inch of that land, dragging flashlights through the undergrowth, shouting his name into the darkness. They never found a single trace. And now he wanted me to go back. I tossed the phone aside and buried my face in my hands. I told myself I wouldn't go, that I wasn't a child anymore, that I owed him nothing. But the truth was, a part of me needed to know, needed to see. Because if that thing I'd met in the cafe wasn't Daniel, then what was it? The next evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself walking the narrow path that led into the woods. The trees loomed ahead, black against the fading sky, their branches like twisted fingers reaching out. The moment I stepped under their canopy, the air grew heavier, colder, as though I had entered another world. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, but the deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. The sounds of the town faded away, swallowed by silence. Even the crickets were quiet. Only the crunch of leaves under my shoes broke the stillness, and even that seemed too loud, echoing strangely between the trunks. I followed the trail we used to take as kids, my mind dredging up fragments of memory with every step. The place looked both familiar and foreign, like walking into a dream of the past where everything was slightly distorted. The trees leaned closer together, their branches overlapping above me until the path was nothing but a narrow tunnel of shadow. And then I saw him. He stood between the trees just ahead, a dark figure outlined against the dim light of the moon. My breath caught in my throat. It was Daniel, the same too-thin body, the same pale face, the same tilt of the head. He didn't move as I approached, didn't raise a hand or make a sound. He simply stood there, watching. For a moment I was almost relieved. At least he was here. At least I hadn't imagined everything. But then I noticed something that made my chest tighten. His feet. They weren't touching the ground. I froze, every muscle locking in place. He hovered just above the earth, his toes hanging lifelessly in the air. The longer I stared, the more impossible it became to explain away. He was floating as still and silent as the trees around him. The urge to run surged through me, but I couldn't move. My body felt pinned in place, my breath shallow and sharp. His head tilted a little further, that unnatural angle stretching his neck until it looked fragile, almost broken. And then, slowly, he began to drift downward. Inch by inch, his body lowered until his feet met the ground with a soundless weight. But there was no grace in the way he stood. His posture was stiff, wrong, like a puppet held up by strings. His movements were jerky, disjointed, as though invisible hands were tugging him into place. I stumbled backward, branches snapping beneath my shoes. Panic exploded inside me, and I turned and ran. The woods blurred around me as I tore through the undergrowth, heart pounding, lungs screaming for air. I didn't stop until the trees broke open and the dim glow of the streetlights welcomed me back to the edge of town. For a long time, I just stood there, gasping, staring into the dark wall of the woods. Nothing followed, no movement, no sound, just silence. When I finally reached home, I slammed the door shut and locked every bolt, pressing my back against the wood as if it could hold back the memory of what I had seen. I told myself I would never go back. Never. But at dawn, my phone buzzed again. Another message. "You left too soon. Come back tonight. Bring no one." And beneath it, attached to the message, was a photo. A blurry picture of me, standing at the edge of the woods, taken from behind. I sat frozen on my couch, staring at the photo glowing on my phone screen. My own silhouette stood at the edge of the woods, my shoulders hunched, my head turned slightly as if I had been watched from only a few feet away. The picture was grainy, but it was unmistakably me. My stomach twisted violently. I had been alone. I was sure of it. No one had followed me out of those woods, yet someone, or something, had been close enough to capture this image. The walls of my house suddenly felt too thin, too fragile to keep me safe. I checked every lock again, every window, every door. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me, even inside my own home. My phone buzzed once more, and though every nerve in my body screamed not to look, I couldn't resist. The message was short. "Don't run this time." Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed until the first rays of morning crept across the ceiling, but the light didn't bring comfort. It only reminded me that night would come again, and with it, the woods, the messages, the figure that wore my old friend's face. I told myself over and over that I wouldn't go back, that I had seen enough. But beneath the fear, something heavier gnawed at me, the thought of answers. If Daniel was truly gone, if he had died all those years ago, then what was walking in his place now? The day dragged by in a blur of restless pacing and hollow silence. Every corner of my house seemed too dark, every shadow stretched too long. I thought about calling someone, telling them everything, but the words stuck in my throat. Who would believe me? And even if they did, what could anyone do? By the time the sun slipped below the horizon, my decision was already made, though I hated myself for it. I grabbed a flashlight and my phone, my hands trembling as I stepped outside. The cool night air wrapped around me like a warning. The woods waited at the edge of town, their black silhouettes cutting jagged lines against the fading sky. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. The crunch of my footsteps seemed deafening in the stillness. My flashlight beam wavered, slicing through trees that loomed like silent sentinels. The path twisted ahead, familiar yet strange, like walking into a memory warped by time. My stomach churned with every step, and still I kept going. The smell reached me first. Damp earth mixed with something sharp and metallic like rust. The air grew colder, sinking into my bones. My light flickered once, twice, before steadying again. My pulse quickened, and then I saw him. Daniel stood between two trees, exactly where I had seen him the night before. His posture was stiff, his arms limp at his sides, his head tilted at that unnatural angle that made me want to look away. His eyes caught the beam of my flashlight, reflecting it back with a glassy sheen. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, without warning, he began to rise. His feet lifted from the earth, slow and silent, until he hovered inches above the ground again. My chest tightened as I watched, unable to look away. His body swayed like a pendulum as if caught on invisible strings. The silence pressed down on me until I thought I might suffocate. My hand shook violently, the flashlight trembling in my grip, and then, slowly, he began to drift forward. Not walking, not stepping, just gliding toward me in broken, jerky motions. His limbs twitched as though controlled by something clumsy, unseen. I stumbled back, but my legs felt like lead. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. His face came into sharper focus as he drew closer. His mouth hung slightly open, but no breath passed through it. His eyes were wide, impossibly wide, unblinking. At the last possible moment, instinct broke through the paralysis. I turned and fled, crashing through branches, scraping my arms and legs against thorns and bark. The woods seemed endless, the path twisting and vanishing beneath my feet. My lungs burned with every gasp of air, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. When the glow of the streetlights finally appeared ahead, relief nearly buckled my knees. I stumbled out of the trees, collapsing onto the asphalt, gasping and heaving. The woods behind me stood silent, impenetrable. I forced myself to look back, half expecting to see him standing at the edge. But there was nothing, only darkness. Shaking violently, I dragged myself home. I locked every door, every window, and sat against the wall waiting for dawn. But as the first light crept into the sky, my phone buzzed on the table. With trembling hands, I picked it up. Another message glowed on the screen, sent at 3:15 a.m. sharp. "You can't run from old friends." And beneath it, another photo. This one showed me sprinting through the woods, mouth open in a scream I didn't remember making. The angle was too close, too clear. Whoever took it had been right behind me. The photo haunted me. My face twisted in terror, my body mid-stride, branches snapping around me. The clarity of the image made my blood run cold. Whoever, or whatever, had taken it had been right behind me, close enough to reach out and touch me. I stared at the picture until my eyes blurred, my stomach tightening into knots. Every instinct screamed at me to run far away, to leave the town, to forget the woods, to forget Daniel. But the pull of the unknown was stronger. I couldn't erase the thought of him, of what I had seen hovering among the trees. Was it really him? Was it some echo of the boy I once knew? The questions hollowed me out until there was nothing left but a need to go back. I hated myself for it. But I knew that if I didn't return, the messages would never stop, and neither would the memories. The next evening, as twilight drained the color from the sky, I found myself walking once again toward the woods. The air was heavier than before, thick with dampness, clinging to my skin. The branches above swayed in a breeze I couldn't feel. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't want to look, but I forced myself. One word glowed on the screen. Closer. The command gnawed at me. My feet carried me forward, deeper into the trees, the path winding into darkness. I followed the old trail we had once walked 100 times as children, when the world had seemed endless and filled with secret wonders. Now it felt like walking into a grave. The smell hit me again, earth and rust, stronger than before. My throat tightened, my flashlight trembling in my hand as I pressed on. And then the barn appeared. I hadn't thought of it in years, but the sight of it hit me like a fist to the chest. The same slanted roof, caved in on one side, the same sagging walls leaning like they could collapse at any second. Memories surged, flashes of us daring each other to step inside, swearing we heard things moving in the shadows. I had never gone further than the doorway. Daniel had always been the brave one. Now, the barn seemed alive. Its broken frame creaked as if something inside shifted with my presence. The air was colder here, biting through my clothes, carrying the faint stench of decay. My phone buzzed again. Inside. I hesitated at the threshold, staring into the dark hollow beyond. Dust floated in the pale strips of moonlight filtering through the broken roof. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but I stepped forward. The floor groaned under my weight, every board threatening to give way. My beam of light swept across rotting wood, shattered tools, piles of old hay blackened with age. Then I saw it in the far corner. The dirt had been disturbed. A wide patch of earth had been dug up recently, the soil loose and uneven. My legs moved on their own, dragging me closer despite the terror clawing at my chest. As I knelt near the disturbed ground, the light caught on something pale. I brushed away the dirt with trembling hands until fabric appeared, tattered, rotting, barely clinging to shape. Old clothes, faded and torn. Recognition stabbed through me like ice. I remembered them. Daniel had worn those exact clothes the summer he vanished. Beneath the cloth was something worse, bone, a skull half buried, its jaw twisted open as if frozen mid-scream. My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat. The sight stole the air from my lungs. My phone buzzed. The sound cracked through the silence like a gunshot. My shaking hands fumbled for it. A new message waited, glowing on the screen. That's where I've been. I dropped the phone into the dirt, scrambling back on my hands and knees. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. The skull's teeth were crooked, familiar. The skull wasn't just anyone's. It was Daniel's. He had been here all along, buried beneath the barn. The world tilted around me, my vision blurred. If Daniel was here, if he had never left this place, then who had been standing in the woods, who had sat across from me in the cafe, who had been sending me messages all this time? As the thought sank into me, the air in the barn seemed to shift. The shadows thickened, pulling inward. The walls groaned as though something pressed against them from the outside. My flashlight flickered once, then again, and then, from the corner where the grave lay, came the faintest sound. A creak, a shift, like something moving beneath the earth. The loose soil trembled. The clothes rustled though no wind touched them. I stumbled to my feet, backing toward the door, but the buzzing of my phone split the silence once more. On the screen, a new message appeared by itself, each letter typed out slowly, deliberately, as though unseen hands were holding it in place. "You're next." I stood frozen in the barn, my breath trapped in my chest, my eyes locked on the words glowing across my phone screen. "You're next." The message pulsed like a wound, every letter a nail hammered into my skull. The dirt at my feet shifted again, faint tremors quivering through the loose soil where Daniel's bones had been left to rot. The air felt heavier, pressing against my lungs until every breath scraped like glass. I stumbled back, clutching the phone, the beam of my flashlight jerking wildly across the walls. Dust swirled, the old boards creaked, and the entire barn seemed to tighten around me. Shadows pressed in, stretching long and thin across the splintered wood, moving in ways they shouldn't have. The smell grew unbearable, wet earth, rust, and something sweeter, rotten, like meat left in the sun. I turned toward the doorway, desperate to escape. But I wasn't alone. He was there. Daniel. Or the thing wearing his face. His body filled the doorway, swaying slightly like a puppet on strings, his head tilted too far to the side. His eyes were wide and glassy, reflecting my flashlight in a way that seemed endless, bottomless. I staggered back, my body colliding with a broken support beam. My chest heaved as I tried to force myself to move, but my legs wouldn't obey. The figure stepped closer. Not walking. Drifting. His arms hung limp at his sides, his feet dragging just above the floorboards, never making a sound. The closer he came, the colder the air grew, the shadows thickening around him like smoke. I raised the flashlight higher, the trembling beam shaking across his pale skin, and for a moment I wished I hadn't. His face wasn't whole. Parts of it seemed wrong, half-finished, as if something had tried to piece together my memories of him, but had forgotten the details. His jaw twitched, hanging at an angle, his lips cracked and unmoving. My phone buzzed in my hand. Against my will, I looked. Another message slid across the screen. "Stay with me." The letters appeared one by one, deliberate, as though typed by invisible fingers inches from my face. The ground beneath me shifted again. My flashlight beam dropped toward the disturbed soil, and I saw something that made my stomach twist. Fingers. Thin, bone-pale fingers pushing up through the loose earth. They clawed their way upward, scraping at the dirt, pulling something out of the grave. The clothes shifted, bones rattling faintly in the silence. I turned to run, my body finally obeying, but the door slammed shut with a force that shook the entire structure. Dust rained down from the rafters. The beam of my flashlight darted back to the doorway. Daniel's figure hadn't moved. He still hovered there, blocking my escape. His head tilted further, an impossible angle, as if his neck had snapped long ago. From the corners of the barn, the shadows thickened, stretching into shapes that moved with jagged, unnatural steps. Figures emerged from the darkness between the beams, their heads tilted the same way, their eyes hollow and unblinking. Dozens of them, all watching, all silent. My phone buzzed again, vibrating violently in my hand. A final message filled the screen. "Old friends never leave." The words burned into my mind as the figures closed in, their bodies twitching like marionettes caught on tangled strings. I backed further into the barn, my legs shaking, my breath tearing through my throat. Behind me, the soil erupted, bones clawing free, tangled in rags of clothing. The skull tilted upward, its jaw hanging wide, and though no sound escaped, I swore I could hear a scream vibrating in the air, echoing in my skull. Daniel drifted closer, his lifeless face inches from mine. The cold rolling off him sank into my skin, deep into my bones, freezing me in place. My flashlight flickered violently, the beam scattering across walls that seemed to crawl with movement. Dozens of eyes reflected back at me, wide and empty. In a desperate moment, I dropped the phone and lunged toward the far wall, slamming my shoulder into a rotten board. Wood cracked, splintered, and gave way just enough for me to stagger through into the night air. I hit the ground outside hard, my hands scraping on rocks and dirt. For a heartbeat, the silence of the night wrapped around me, and I thought maybe I had escaped. But when I looked back, the barn stood tall and wrong against the moonlight. The doorway was open again, black and endless, but no figures stood there. No shadows moved. It looked abandoned, lifeless, as though nothing had ever been inside. My phone buzzed from where it lay in the dirt beside me, screen cracked but still glowing. I reached for it with shaking hands. A new message appeared, slow and deliberate. "We're already with you." The street behind me was empty. The woods were silent. Yet as I looked around, I felt it. The weight of dozens of eyes watching from the dark, not just from the barn, not just from the trees, from everywhere. The night pressed close, and I finally understood the truth. Daniel hadn't come back to see me. He hadn't come back for answers. He had come to drag me into whatever had claimed him, to pull me into the silence where old friends waited forever. The phone buzzed one last time in my hand. The screen went black, and the shadows around me began to move.